Hi, and welcome to the next series of the One series. Today we're going to be focusing on technology, sort of emerging technologies, and I have the pleasure of inviting my guests. Can you give me a little bit of an overview of where you're from, please? Simon.
Yeah, my name's Simon Powell. I'm the Chief Information Officer at MOSL. I've been in utilities for an entire 10 months now, so complete expert, as you can see. Massive learning curve from where I was in manufacturing. But my entire career has always been around technology, so really excited to have the discussion today.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Mercer-Royce. I am Director of Partnerships at Gentrack. Been there for about a year now, so should vaguely know what I'm doing, but been in energy for nearly 15 years. So used to work for Accenture, used to work for Kraken as part of one of the tentacles of the Octopus Energy Group. And prior to that, I was in Australia for 10 years working for a transmission and distribution network operator.
Nice to meet you all. My name's Cissie. My background is in regulation and policy, so I spent nearly a decade of my career working on price controls. So that includes kind of driving policy for financial incentives and working on large capital projects. More recently, I work at Accenture now in their utilities practice, and the last few years, I've been focusing on digital strategy and flexibility markets.
Thank you. So let's get started. So we hear these words like smart grid, AI, but what impact are they actually going to have on our industry, do you think?
Yeah, so I think from my perspective, smart grid is kind of a catch-all term for lots of different things. So it can mean different things to different people. So it could be automation, it could be demand-side response, it could be AI and machine learning. So I think we don't need to worry and get too hung up about what it means. It's really around how do we drive a smarter, more flexible system to incorporate renewables into the future as we go through this energy transition journey.
I think from a regulatory perspective, with these kind of technologies and digital strategy and all of these things, the right environment needs to be in place. I think historically, and rightly so, the industry has been quite risk adverse because, if we're not, blackouts can happen. So I think from my view, from a regulation perspective, yes, having the right environment in place where we can kind of take calculated risks and low regret options to kind of push these kind of accelerators forward so we can meet our overarching goals like net zero and clean power 2030, things like that.
Yeah, I look at this from an IT perspective, and I think about the skills that are required in order to support things like smart meter and smart meter data. MOSL's in the water industry, and we're typically 4 or 5 years behind energy in terms of the data volumes, but we're expecting data volumes to grow 130, 140 times versus where they are today. That's a totally different skill set that's required. We need people who can manage big data. We need people who can tell stories from data. We need people who are data scientists. So I think there has to be retraining. There has to be new skills coming through, but really exciting time.
Yeah, 100%. And I think so I work in the sexy world of billing and CRM, but it is really around that data element. And we see in Australia, for example, in the energy world, they've moved to 5-minute settlement periods. We're looking at doing that here in the UK, and that proliferation of data is going to be huge. What are we going to do with it? And it's only as useful as we can process that and understand it and get some value and unlock that. So we don't have all the answers yet, but it's going to be really, really interesting to find out how we can drive innovation and also hopefully drive down costs as well for the end consumer.
I think the data interoperability point is very important. And I know NISO is doing a lot of work around there of trying to have a common good practice kind of sharing element for data, because I think sometimes you'll see, especially with flexibility and demand data and even the lower voltage levels at the DNO level, sometimes SCADA data just isn't there. And it's really hard to make informed decisions when you don't have the full picture of data available to you.
Yeah, I think there's a really interesting next step is to then consider who consumes the data and what do we mean by open data. I know this is something that utilities in general have grappled with. We're absolutely at the beginning of that within the water industry. And what does open data mean? It certainly doesn't mean open to everybody because there's data privacy concerns there. But there are concerns for the greater good, I think. And how do we share utilities data? How can we make better informed decisions based on that data? So, I look at energy and think, what can we take into water?
5 minutes settle data. I mean, goodness me, half hourly at the moment. So that's definitely going to be a change to the industry.
Yeah, definitely. And I think you have to remember the end consumer as well, because I don't have the time or energy, and I'm in energy, to look and consume and understand all that data. So it's really around how can utilities synthesize that data and make it meaningful and impactful for the end consumer.
Well, that's exactly what I wanted to talk about next, actually. So, I think sometimes we forget that there's a customer at the end of this journey. So how can we make sure that customers are actually at the heart of what we do, how they're using the data, how they're using it, to help us better support the grids and look to net zero. So how on earth can we bring customers on that journey?
I think you need to start with the customer and kind of work backwards. And from my kind of background, the customer is always the focus in terms of, it's enshrined in law that, organizations and public bodies need to think about and protect the interest of customers today and in the future. And I think that's another important point. What does the future customer look like? Are we thinking about all the different personas of customers when we're designing a network and designing our services for customers?
Yeah, and I think it's really around understanding those personas and what's driving customer behavior. And we kind of see a world where there's kind of three main levers. So one fundamentally is price, and more so ever than now with the cost of living crisis and energy and water bills being at the forefront of a lot of people's worries. Like, how do you drive a more affordable service for people? Secondly is really around simplicity. So how do we start to make energy and water more consumable and understandable? And as we transition to the future of energy, how do we set up tariffs or products or services that people want to engage with? So an EV tariff, for example, I don't have the time to see when the energy is cheapest and turn my EV on or drive it somewhere, but I want that to be automated and done and controlled potentially by my utility. And then the third, I think, is greenness, or something around green. I think most people now believe that climate change is a real thing, hopefully. But I think that kind of comes, unfortunately, after price and simplicity. But I think if you can get green energy with those two other factors included, then I think a lot of people are willing to do that. So how do we start to bundle those together?
I would love simplicity when it comes to the EV world, because driving here today, that EV anxiety and downloading 5 different apps, and every time I go somewhere,
but it's real, right? It's
app,
a real range anxiety is
absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think there's a micro and macro economic aspect to this. So I think for households, there's a real key concern about utilities bills. There's a concern about sustainability. I think we all look at that, and green tariffs in energy and water efficient usage. But I think there's also a macro economic aspect, and this is how can we show usage statistics for the entire UK PLC. And so that informs things like government policy. Are we building economic development in the right place? Are we putting houses in the right place? You probably don't realise this, but 15 of the 26 water companies or water areas in the UK are stressed, which means that we can't just build wherever we want to. There's not enough water. There was a cancer hospital in Cambridge that was rejected because there wasn't enough water to run it. So I think the data that we're collecting from all of these smart devices can really help inform government policy. So I really welcome that, and I welcome the regulators being involved in accepting.
We're looking at Cissie there, but the same holds true in transmission distribution networks as well, up and down the whole of the UK, right? We see a lot of congestion and a lot of struggle with adding new renewables onto the grid because it's already at max capacity. So how do we unlock that, and how do we bring on more generation?
Those big data centers that you...
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Grid reinforcement as well. And how do you bring customers on that journey with you? Because we will have to reinforce the grid in lots of areas that we don't want to. And how do you make sure that the right people are consulted and brought on that journey with us? Because obviously infrastructure projects take a long time to build. You're going to need more kind of solutions to help you manage stability and voltage and things. So what are some other ways that digital could help optimize the grid? Because currently it's not being optimized, is it?
No. So actually last year can you believe this, that National Grid had to pay wind turbines up in Scotland 280 million to turn off the turbines because the grid was at full capacity. So not only are we having less renewables on the grid that we're not able to use because we're physically turning off the turbines, but also that 280 million is spread across everybody's customer bills. So we're all having to pay for that. So I think a lot needs to be done to rectify that. And essentially, it's really similar to the water industry, Simon. It's the easiest way to explain it is the pipes aren't big enough, essentially. And if you had more taps at the beginning of the pipe, the same amount of water would still come out the other end. And that's the same with electricity. Just because we're adding on more generation, there's nowhere for it to go.
So how, and you might not know the answer to this question, how could we fix that? Is it batteries? Is it storage? Is it... Yeah.
That's a whole can of worms.
I think all of the above. So storage is really helpful. So if we could have storage, we're still going to need upgrades to the physical poles and wires, so the transmission and distribution network. We can have embedded generation up and down the country as well, not just in Scotland. I don't know, Cissie, if...
Yeah, and I think digital will help with that as well. If you look at kind of ADMS systems, predictive maintenance for network companies, for example, to make sure there's less outage time and whatnot. But I think an important point to make as well is that digital is very much an accelerator and a catalyst, but it's not the only panacea, I think, to help us meet net zero and clean power 2030. So there's loads of other areas that Mel had suggested, but also policy areas and regulation as well. There's REMA, they're looking at locational pricing, for example. How do you encourage the right market signals to get the generation to where it needs to connect? And that's the problem we're seeing in Scotland, I think.
I think that's really interesting. It goes back to what we were talking about, informing government policy. So if you could put economic development where it's cheaper to generate and not have to distribute it far and wide, then you can use that power when it's there. And it's a very similar situation in water. You want economic development where there's natural resources. And if you incentivize that with better tariffs, as Mel and Cissie were talking about earlier, then I think you get a better governance around where you should be building.
Yeah, and I think bang on. Back at my time at Accenture, we always used to look at transformations as technology is just an enabler. And there's kind of three key things. So people, process, and technology, and all things need to work in harmony for the whole system to work and to change. And I think it's not just looking at one element of that. We really need to look at what people are wanting. How do we change the status quo? And how can technology help make this system work a lot more efficiently?
So we touched very slightly a little bit about smart grids, but I guess also what we're hearing now is about flexibility, batteries. What kind of impact or what part is flexibility going to play, on the industry, and how can we all help support that?
Yeah, I think we're looking at each other laughing because we both kind of come from this world, but I think it's going to play a vital part, and that's not just us as end consumers, but that's large businesses as well. And for those who don't know what flexibility is, it really is just how do we get supply and demand more in sync. So as we move to a world where we've got variable generation, we call renewables, because if the wind's not blowing or the sun's not shining, everyone can't come home and charge their EVs, for example. The utopia for network operators is to have a network fully utilized, because networks are built for the peak. So it's really quite interesting that these peaks only happen like once a year. I've got a fun fact for everyone if you want to have a quick quiz. When was the last peak demand period in the UK, and what was the event? Has anyone got any good guesses?
Football
Euros.
Yes, Sharon. Can we go as close to what the event was, or the year, or the match?
World Cup.
I think it was a World Cup. Yes, Simon.
World Cup.
Yes.
Final?
Okay, we're going to get there. We're going to get there. Cissie, any guesses?
The last time England was in the final.
Okay, guys, I think collectively we're nailing it. But yeah, so it was the 4th of July, 1990.
Oh.
England versus Germany, penalties. We lost on penalties. Yeah. But as soon as it finishes, everyone goes off. And I know we talk about it like the coronation coffee. I had a friend who worked for National Grid, and he said it's actually everybody going to the toilet.
Okay.
And the power required to flush the toilet. So maybe you can demyth that, Simon. But anyway, I ramble on. But the point being, how do we match supply and demand?
Yeah, I think if I think about water, then it's more seasonal rather than time of day. But same sort of issue, that there's 100 days worth of storage capacity in water, and in the summer we get very close to running out. We have non-essential use bans that come in. We see hosepipe bans from personal life, and actually water isn't well dispersed around the country. There are parts where it rains a lot, and I grew up near the Welsh border where it rains a lot, and now I live in the Thames Valley, which is one of those scarce areas. So I think the data can actually help us plan better, have better drought plans, and help make the case for more water storage.
And Mel and I were talking before about demand side flexibility and how customer behavioral change will be the biggest challenge unless you can automate and simplify things. And when you talk about accessibility of these services and who can participate and benefit as well, and this kind of comes down to why we're here with One. If you think about who we're designing these services for, usually, you have a Swish EV or you have a heat pump. You're probably white collar, able to work from home. And I think something that we forget as well is the people who are able to participate have the headspace for it. Mm-hmm. So if, you're a single mother of 3 working between 2 jobs, you're not going to think about what time you're boiling the kettle. It's just not realistic in this world right now. So again, going back to digitalization of that, how do you automate things and make it simple and easy for people to engage?
Do you know, that's a really good point, because that's probably something in my little bubble that I wouldn't have thought of, because I have got the headspace to be able to drive it in an EV and charge it. And I don't have to be so concerned about when I'm boiling my kettle. But yeah, that's so that kind of leads me on to sort of my next question really is, we're here with the One. So how can women actually play a part within our industry to really sort of drive forward some of these technologies and sort of like some of these changes within industry?
I'm a problem solver. I'm in IT, and people who are in IT, that's what we're there for. We look for problems. We look for problems to solve. And I think if you have a group that isn't diverse, you only see one set of problems. And so you only manufacture or you only solve for one set of problems. And so you end up with inequity in society. I think if you've got a workforce that is diverse, whether that's gender or ethnicity or whatever characteristic, then you're open to far more possibilities. So specifically with women, I think I'm very lucky. I work for a company where it's 56% women. Mm-hmm. And there's a real strong drive on STEM for people coming through. I'm a great believer in STEM. I do work with local schools. Both my daughters are into STEM as well. So it's creating that environment where people can feel safe, authentic, and willing to really be productive in. So if we can do all that, that's not easy, then I think we've got some really good angles to go for.
Yeah, and I think it's fascinating, isn't it, that women, I think, are the majority of the population. I think we're 51%, but we're like a minority when it comes to the workforce. So I think the stat I looked at, I don't know how factual it is. I Googled it. I think it was like 48% of women are in the paid workforce. So I know a lot of women work in non-paid work as well. But in energy sector, there's only 16% of women. Mm-hmm. And that's awful, and how can we encourage and incentivize people to move into our industry? And STEM is a great tool for that, but that's going to take 10, 20, 30 years for that to be realized. So I think we need to look at other ideas as well, and how can we encourage people from other industries? Because we're not in this alone. It's technology. We're going through a transition. Lots of other industries have been through this. And I think broadening our perspective, and as you said, Simon, around diversity and of thought and ideas, we can bring in women from industries and learn from that across energy and water, I think.
Yeah.
And I think, Simon, what you said about creating an environment for that as well. I think in a historically male-dominated kind of industry, it's important to have those allies. And I'm not talking about the kind of hip hip hooray, it's International Women's Day kind of performative allies. Allyship to me looks like, I suppose, doing the hard work of calling out microaggressions when they're happening on the ground at the time.
True allyship.
Yeah, and it looks like, I suppose, people who will back you, who will say your name in a room full of opportunities when you're not there. And I think that can be transformative in terms of welcoming and encouraging people to work in this kind of industry.
Yeah, I went to a meeting the other day. I think there was 25 of us and I was the only female.
Amazing.
And I think I noticed it. I think I'm kind of maybe used to it.
Were you asked to take notes?
Yeah, I was asked to take notes. I curtsied upon entry.
Excellent. Did you prepare lunch?
I think the men afterwards were quite shocked because if I wasn't there, they probably would have just not even noticed. Yeah. But because I was there, they realised that, wow, oh my goodness, there's predominantly men. So I think it was quite shocking for men as well. And I really agree with you, Cissie. I think silence is compliance, and I think we really need people to stand up and say something if there's a problem.
So that just sort of leads me on to sort of like the final thought, really, because we are underrepresented within the industry. Is that going to have an impact on, the emerging technologies and this transitions for the grid? So what can we do?
Yeah.
That's a big question.
I'll take the first part of are we impacted? Yes. Yeah. I think 100% it impacts creativity, innovation. I think it encourages group thought and tunnel vision because, well, let's just do it the way we've always done it. And I think to bring in that other 50% of the population and really challenge the status quo and break the norm of how we have done things, as you said, traditionally in a male-dominated engineering kind of black and white world, there are 50 shades of grey, and let's explore those, right? I think it's important to get women in and to really kind of break that mold. So yeah, I think it is a big part that women can play.
And in all different sectors as well. I think it goes beyond just digital and innovation in utilities, but we need to reflect the audience that we're building solutions for, and how else better to do that than have those people in decision-making positions.
Yeah.
Great way. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a real strong role model need. And that there are really strong role models certainly in water, of chief executives of water companies, of our chief executive, Sarah, is a fantastic role model. She spends a long time mentoring people within the industry. And I think that's great, but it doesn't need to be exclusively women role modeling women. I think it's about role modeling and demonstrating the right behaviors. And that's not exclusively a women-only task. I think men have got a really strong role to play here in making environments safe, in making environments inclusive, and actually making environments creative. So it's not just about, am I safe at work? That should be a given. It should be, how can I perform to my best ability at work? And I come from a manufacturing background, and that hasn't always been the case. So it's actually quite refreshing to come into a place like this and to see positive women role models and see the impact it has. So a lot of work to be done. Water in itself, I think, is about 30% women. So it's nowhere near where MOSL is. And even if I look at MOSL, you sort of scratch below the high level statistics and you look at where is that demographic skewed. It's absolutely skewed towards the more junior members of staff. So the heads of still tend to be men. And that is a sort of a function of longevity, but I think it's also something that we're working really hard to change.
Yeah, and I think it's a function of the historical. Again, I mentioned the status quo. I think that's how it's always been done, and I think especially in energy, everyone's come from an engineering world and they've kind of gone up through the ranks, and you don't always need that, especially now we're moving into more of a technology era and into the unknown of the energy transition. No one knows what the future holds. Will we all have 2 EVs, or will we all have autonomous cars and no one will need a car anymore? Will we all have solar panels, or will hydrogen come and blow everything out the water? So we need complete different minds and brains and ideas. That isn't just kind of maybe what you learned in an engineering book at university 30 years ago. So that's kind of, I think, let's use cross-industry and talent from women all over the levels and organisations.
Thank you ever so much. I'd love to do this in 10 years' time and see if our predictions have come true, or actually regroup and see where we are. But yeah, it's been a really interesting chat. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.